Hey everybody, it's been a little while. Been very busy with work, which is a good thing. But I did want to mention a couple of books to you today, and one of which I'm just going to basically mention, and the other one I'm going to talk about a little bit, an idea that came to mind. I recently attended a conference, which I think I spoke about in my last video or so. It's the Connecticut Valley Conference on Reformed Theology in Connecticut. About a week ago now, and it was called Calvin at 500, His Life and Legacy. And for those of you who don't know, this year, in fact on July 10th of this year, we're going to be commemorating the 500th anniversary of John Calvin's birth, and it's really a celebration of a great life. But I did pick up a couple of, actually a stack of books at the conference. But I did want to mention a couple of them that I did pick up. And the first one is a brand new book. It's called John Calvin, Man of the Millennium. And it's a brand new book that just came out. It's by Philip Vollmer. And the foreword is by Joseph Morecraft. Actually, the foreword is beautiful. There's a lot of great stuff at the beginning of this book. There's a timeline, there's the foreword, there's a couple of other messages from the editor, preface, a few other things which are really nice. And it's just basically, it's a history of John Calvin's life. And it's written really specifically for his the 500th anniversary of his birth. It's a beautiful book, it's hardcover. I got it for a really good price at the conference, and I've seen them in some different places now. I saw it at the Homeschoolers Convention this past weekend as well, so it should be pretty easy to find. But the other book that I wanted to talk about a little bit today is called The Wages of Spin by Dr. Carl Trueman. Dr. Trueman was one of the speakers at the conference that I went to, along with Dr. Sean Lucas. Dr. Trueman, if I remember correctly, I believe he is on the faculty at Westminster Theological Seminary. He's one of those British guys. He's wonderful to listen to. He's a very sharp theologian, and this book is a collection of essays by him on many different topics. And the first one is called "Reckoning with the Past in an Anti-Historical Age." And this is one of those things that's been bothering me for a long, long time now. And it's rampant mostly among young people. But the more that young people get older, especially when they're getting now to my age, mid-30s, even now when people in their 40s, we're finding a trend where history is really becoming irrelevant. Things of history, people are just calling these things obsolete, that they don't have any bearing on the things of today. It can be ideas, it can be discoveries, books, heroes, certain people. They're just becoming irrelevant. And I think this is a tragedy. It's a very, very big mistake. And there's a couple of points here that Dr. Trueman makes that I wanted to just read a couple of excerpts to you. One thing he says in terms, really to Christians, he says, let me start here. "I want to make the case that the only hope for such orthodox theology and for the churches which give visible expression to such theology lies in the ability, or rather the willingness, of those of us who claim the name Christian to be what we always should be, that is, exponents of a counter-cultural movement which finds its norms and its purpose not in an assimilation to the wider culture, but in a recovery of its own distinctiveness." Now, the Christian heritage is rich, and you can start in Hebrews chapter 11 with that. History is fundamental to the Christian faith. It's fundamental. And of course, the Bible is the greatest history book ever written. Now, I know there's some of you who are going to start writing comments about that, and you can do that as much as you want. That's fine. He goes on in the next section. He says, "The most significant threats to the Reformed faith is that of the tendency of the modern world to be anti-historical. By this I mean the aversion of modern men and women to tradition and history as a source of wisdom and even authority. In a world where the very language that is used reflects the deep-seated suspicion of all things old and an adulation of most things new, this is hardly a contentious claim. It is, however, one that has massive significance for the church and for theology. And if you find that there are a lot of Christians out there, and I've met many of them and spoken with them and pleaded with them, who know nothing about history. They don't even know any history of the church. And therefore, their desire to study theology and to study the Bible and to really dig into these things from a historical perspective and from a traditional perspective, they don't want to do it. It's just me and Jesus, and that's it. It's not enough. You don't know your God if you don't know history. You don't, because you haven't seen him work through history, and you haven't seen the providence of God working through history. It's a big mistake that you're making if you reject those things. He goes on, he says, the intellectual roots of modern anti-historical tendency can be found in the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries. Now some of you are saying, oh my goodness, the Enlightenment, that was one of the greatest times ever. Well, not exactly. Whether one looks at the continental or the Anglo-American tradition, it is quite clear that the rhetoric of the new and the novel quickly becomes associated with the improved and the better. This is the trap. While the last thing a theologian in the 16th century or before wished to be accused of was novelty or innovation, in the Enlightenment era, an iconoclastic view of history and tradition was seen as part and parcel of the freeing of humankind from bondage and darkness. Thus, Voltaire, Kant, and company were happy to understand themselves as taking part in an enlightenment and surround their work with the language of liberty, while dismissing their predecessors as scholastic, obscurantist, and inhabiting the Dark Ages. This intellectual tendency toward the exaltation of the new at the expense of the old was massively reinforced with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. At this time, new modes of production, urbanization, and the rise to dominance of the middle classes led to the fundamental reshaping of society and its values. Now, obviously, there is a lot of great things that have come out of the Industrial Revolution. There were even some great things that came out of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. There were wonderful things that came out of that. However, what came out of that isn't so good is man's pride. It is our thinking that we are better or more advanced, more developed than men and women of, say, 500 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago. Are we? Maybe we've learned more since then, but ignorance does not necessarily go hand in hand with stupidity. I mean, yes, there are a lot of ignorant people out there that want to stay ignorant. That's stupid. But ignorance, not knowing certain things, does not make someone stupid, and it does not make them irrelevant. Okay? Now, if there are scientists out there that are not studying the work of Sir Isaac Newton, Louis Pasteur, all those great scientific minds from years and years past, they are doing a great disservice not only to their own knowledge, but they're doing a great disservice to those who benefit or those who learn from their work and their knowledge. And people seem to have this trend about erasing history as they go because, well, it's irrelevant. They didn't know what we know today. And, you know, the same thing is happening with marriage. It's the same kind of a trend. Well, marriage between a man and woman, that's an old idea, which means it's a bad idea. It's obsolete. So why don't we just let men marry men and women marry women? And sooner or later we're going to start marrying our pets. It's ridiculous. I think this is a terrible trend. History is so important. Now, I'm not an expert historian, I can tell you that. I don't know everything about history. But I have learned more in the last few years as a Christian man in studying than I ever did when I was younger, because I really wasn't interested in it much when I was younger. But the faith has put a desire into me. It's so relevant, and you can learn so much from it. Not just about ideas, but about innovation, science, everything. History comes to bear on everything. So that's my message for today. One other thing, I did pick up a book, a new book that I'm very excited about, which I'm going to start. It's probably going to take up a good video series, and it's about slavery in the Bible. I'm sure a lot of you are going to be very excited about that. I'm looking forward to doing those videos. I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing some things that I have to say about that from the Bible, because I know there's a lot of controversy about that, and Christians seem to want to just stay away from that. They avoid that subject like the plague, and I can't. I think that's also a tragedy. So I'm going to do my best to dig into it. So in time, thanks for listening, and I'll see you then.